Why is it that some people walk into any room and instantly command respect, while you're still trying to figure out why nobody takes you seriously? I'm about to show you the exact psychological mechanism that flips power dynamics instantly, but there's a problem. Most people who learn this technique make one critical mistake that actually makes them look weaker. I'll tell you what that mistake is, but first, let me show you why everything you think you know about power is completely backwards. You've been in those situations where you felt powerless. Your boss dismissing your ideas, that friend who always interrupts you, the person who somehow always gets their way in group decisions. You probably think the solution is to become more aggressive, to push harder, to demand respect. But here's what's really happening that nobody talks about. You're trapped in a power dynamic that you didn't choose, but you're unconsciously maintaining it every single day. And the technique I'm about to share will change this immediately, but there's something most people don't realize about power that makes them use this technique wrong. I'll explain that crucial mistake in a moment. But first, understand this. Most power dynamics aren't about actual power at all. They're about perceived power. And perceived power comes from one source that 99% of people completely overlook. It's your relationship with discomfort. Think about the last time someone made you feel powerless. What was really happening in that moment? You felt uncomfortable, and instead of sitting with that discomfort, you immediately tried to escape it. You backed down, agreed, made yourself smaller to make the discomfort go away. But here's the secret that changes everything. The person who appeared to have power over you was just as uncomfortable as you were. The difference is they let you carry the burden of resolving that discomfort. They pushed their discomfort onto you, and you accepted it. Now, this is where most people make their first mistake when they learn this. They think the solution is to push their discomfort back onto others aggressively. But that's not power. That's just creating a power struggle. Real power is something completely different, and it requires understanding the second principle I'm about to share. Real power isn't about dominating others. It's about being comfortable with discomfort while others scramble to escape it. When you can sit calmly in awkward silence while the other person fills it with nervous chatter, you hold the power. When you can receive criticism without defending yourself while they work harder to get a reaction, you hold the power. This is why confident people seem so effortless. They feel discomfort just as much as you do, but they've learned not to rush toward relief. They've learned to be curious about discomfort instead of afraid of it. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is the part that most people mess up completely. There's a specific way to use this discomfort principle that instantly flips any power dynamic, but if you do it wrong, you'll actually look desperate and weak. The mistake is trying to prove you're comfortable with discomfort instead of actually being comfortable with it. So how do you actually flip the power dynamic? It starts with your first power move. The next time you feel that familiar discomfort in a social situation, instead of immediately trying to fix it, get curious about it. Notice where you feel it in your body. Notice what thoughts are running through your mind. Notice how badly you want to make it go away. Then deliberately choose to stay with it for 10 more seconds. This is harder than it sounds because your brain will scream at you to do something, anything, to relieve the tension. But in those 10 seconds, you'll start to notice something remarkable. The other person's discomfort becomes visible to you, but staying with discomfort is just the foundation. If that's all you do, you might come across as weird or disconnected. You need the second power move, and this is where most people who try this technique fail completely. The second power move is learning to respond rather than react. When someone says something that triggers you, your immediate impulse is to defend, explain, or counterattack. This is a reaction. And reactions always give your power away because they show that the other person can control your emotional state. A response is different. A response comes after a pause, after you've noticed your discomfort and chosen how to engage. Sometimes it's saying nothing at all. Sometimes it's asking a question instead of making a statement. Here's what this looks like. Someone criticizes your work in a meeting. Instead of immediately defending it or explaining your reasoning, you pause. You feel the discomfort. You notice your impulse to justify yourself. Then you respond with, "That's interesting feedback. Help me understand what specifically isn't working for you." Notice what just happened. You didn't defend. You didn't attack. You didn't shrink. You acknowledged their perspective and put the responsibility back on them to be specific. You stayed curious instead of defensive. But even mastering these first two moves isn't enough if you make the third mistake that kills your power instantly. This mistake is so common that even people who understand discomfort and responses still end up looking weak. The mistake is still caring too much about approval. This brings us to the third power move, and this is the most counterintuitive one. It's learning to be genuinely comfortable with other people's disapproval, not pretending to be comfortable, but actually being okay with it. Most power struggles happen because both people are desperately trying to be right, to be liked, to be approved of. But approval seeking is power giving. Every time you modify your behavior to get someone else's approval, you hand them control over your emotional state. True power comes from being more interested in being authentic than in being liked. This doesn't mean being rude or inconsiderate. It means being willing to disappoint people when your values and their expectations don't align. Think about someone you know who has natural authority. They're not trying to convince you of anything. They're not working for your approval. They state their position clearly, and they're perfectly comfortable with you agreeing or disagreeing. That comfort with your potential disapproval is what makes them influential. But here's the practice that most people avoid because it feels too scary. Start saying no to small requests that you don't actually want to fulfill. Not rudely, not with a long explanation, just a simple, no, I can't do that. Notice how uncomfortable this feels. Notice your urge to soften it with excuses. Resist that urge. What you'll discover is that most people actually respect you more when you have clear boundaries, not less. The people who get upset when you stop people-pleasing are usually the ones who are benefiting from your people-pleasing. But even if you master all three of these moves, there's still one more element that separates people with temporary power from people with lasting influence. And this fourth element is what makes the difference between someone people fear and someone people actually want to follow. The fourth power move is understanding that real influence comes from making other people feel powerful, not powerless. This seems contradictory, but it's the secret that separates true leaders from petty tyrants. When you're secure in your own power, you don't need to diminish others to feel important. You can listen fully without feeling threatened. You can acknowledge good ideas even when they're not yours. You can admit when you're wrong without feeling like you're losing something. This is the ultimate power flip. Instead of trying to win against other people, you start creating situations where everyone can win. Instead of hoarding influence, you share it. And paradoxically, this makes people want to follow your lead, to include you, to seek your opinion. But remember, none of these four moves work if you use them as techniques to manipulate others. The moment you're trying to appear powerful, instead of actually being comfortable with yourself, people will sense the desperation underneath. The power has to be real, not performed. Power isn't something you take from others. It's something you develop within yourself. The power dynamic flips the moment you stop trying to control how others see you and start focusing on how clearly you see yourself. That clarity, that self-possession, that comfort with discomfort, that's what real power looks like. And once you understand this, you'll never feel powerless again. You'll walk into any situation knowing that your power comes from within, not from what others think of you. That's when you become truly influential, when you become someone others naturally look to for guidance.